normal again, and it was great. So we are here today. This is the adult forum with confirmation class kind of combined in with that. If you are planning on being confirmed or reaffirmed or received on June 29th, please raise your hand. Okay. All right. So for everyone who has their hand raised, we have some paperwork that needs to be complete, and it needs to be complete next week. There's a 5:30 wine and dessert and cheese gathering, and I would really like it if you all came to that, because then we could get a lot of that paperwork done. But if not, then contact me and we'll get it done some other way, okay? Now, we are beginning with, you have gone through the different things in the Book of Common Prayer, and so in the Catechism talks about who are the leaders of the church. You know what the first category is?
Laity.
It's laity. That is most of you, with the exception of Gerald out there. So, leadership of the laity. So we're starting today. I want to introduce you to 4 people who have been really good leaders in this church, and they have had a variety of responsibilities, and they're going to tell you a little bit about themselves, so that especially you who are new will see some of the people who are, we shouldn't call you old. So we call you experienced. Yeah, those who have experience. Have been leaders in a number of ways, and I want you confirmands and being reaffirmed and received, to already be thinking, okay, what part of the church may you want to, what's the next step? Because involvement into the body of the church is just so important. I think the next step after confirmation is really vitally important for you, because you want to have, see St. Paul's as not only a wonderful cathedral, but your spiritual home. Now, just like any other home, in our home, my husband and I both have responsibilities. I'm really glad mine is not to take out the garbage, because that's his job. Sometimes he asks me to cover, but really he's that, and he's also the dishwasher, and I'm also glad he has that job. And I'm the cook. And every now and then we switch around, but basically we have our jobs, and we know. And I think everyone who is a part of the church, in order to claim this as home, then that means interaction with the body faithful. So today we're going to hear from my good friends, Jeff Irwin, and Jeff is going to be first, and then Molly Talbert, and Robert Dennis, and then John Coons. And they're going to tell you a little bit about themselves as experienced members of St. Paul's, and also a little bit about the ministries they've been involved in. We're going to be very time conscious, and so we will conclude by somewhere between 11:15 and 11:20 to get ready for the next service. Okay, Jeff. Thank you.
This was a little different than I imagined. I was kind of thinking sitting in the parlor on the couches, chatting with each other and having a real family conversation, but I'll try to feel that up here on the podium on Zoom. And I would like to also start out by saying that when Mother Susan asked about this, I was kind of like, Susan, I'm a little afraid I'd be the weak link in the group that you're asking. And I think a couple of these guys signed the cornerstone when this church was built. And I wasn't singling out just the 2 guys. I came to St. Paul's about 25 years ago. I moved to Oklahoma City in December of 1994. That date might ring a bell because of the bombing in 95. I've been here for all of 5 months. I lived in Heritage Hills. It was a kind of monumental time for me with the bombing of Oklahoma City, because I'd started coming to this church when I first moved. And after the bombing, it was really difficult period for me. I found that living so close, seeing the searchlights every night that were at the Murrah building, coming back to the cathedral and seeing the damage was just, it was heartbreaking. And we'd come to services here in this room, because of course we couldn't use the cathedral at the time, and CNN, was set up in this corner. It was a surreal period. And honestly, it was hard for me to come back. And I probably took about a 9-month or so sabbatical from church because it just was painful to drive up here and see the bombing site right there and see the church in the condition that it was in. But eventually, the community of St. Paul's, which included many of my neighbors, I'm thrilled to see a couple of the confirmants that are coming back, or coming to St. Paul's, that are also our neighbors. Many of the community of St. Paul's, including the neighborhood of Heritage Hills, started coming back together and trying to get back to normal, sort of like we're trying to get back to normal today. And what's wonderful is we have this community to guide us through that and to bring us back into kind of our lives as we want them to be and as we remember them being before the pandemic, or in this case, before the bombing. So that being said, so I've been here about 25 years, and I felt like I was guided here. I lived in New Jersey before coming here, and I was at church there telling people goodbye, and a couple of people came up and said, when you get to Oklahoma City, you need to check out the cathedral. I've heard really good things about it. So I think somebody from there pushed me here. And honestly, I never visited anywhere else. I never went to All Souls, even though I worked across the street from All Souls. I never tried it. I came here and stayed for the last 25 years. Involvement here has been, for me, as a listener and a reader at the services, I'm anxious to get back to that and to see us all sharing the cup again, and hopefully that will be sometime soon, as well as working with the vergers here. Both of those are very liturgical driven, which to me in the Episcopal Church, that's very much a cornerstone of our practice, is the liturgy and the continuing liturgy. So those were what really drew me to the service of the church. As a verger, I think it's a great ministry because we're able to be part of making a service really, making it run smoothly, making it interesting, making it reverent, assisting the clergy, assisting the congregation, and pretty much just acting sort of as a stage manager for the whole event. It's a lot of fun to do it, but it's also a great service, I think, to the people involved in the service. I would encourage all of you to really look at those liturgical areas and to be involved. That's not to say that there are not some really important jobs outside of the liturgy. I hope Molly will talk about her time on the vestry. Barbara Dennis has been on the vestry, John Kuntz as well. Those are incredibly important roles that we've seen, particularly through the last couple of years, how the vestry's brought us through this whole pandemic business and gotten us to this point. So I think that's my message. Glad to be here. I'm thrilled to see you all here, and look forward to seeing you again as you become ingrained in the church. Thank you.
Very nice.
Thanks, Jeff.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Molly Talbert, and it turns out, I did not realize this, that Jeff and I started here at just about the same time. Miles and I were living in Washington, D.C., got married in 1996 and moved here, and one of the conversations we had was that we would be living in his hometown, near his family, and we knew our boys would be going to the schools that his family had gone to, and I said, the one thing I want is that we need to go to an Episcopal church, and that will be my continuity with my family. And so since we also lived in Heritage Hills, this was the obvious place to start. And our very first service here, services were already in Dean Willie Hall. This was after the bombing. And so we've been members here for about 2 years before we ever saw the inside of the cathedral. But there was just such a spirit among the congregation of, you know, we will see this through and we will be back in our beautiful building, and we will make this room a beautiful building. And this room was not as beautiful then as it is now. It has been beautified substantially, but it was wonderful and it was cozy, and you know, the Episcopal Church can make metal folding chairs look really nice when they're filled with people, and we had still had our beautiful liturgical service, and it was inspiring. It really was. Since we came here when we first got married, had kids pretty soon, and so our first few years we were really more takers of services than givers of service. And so one of the things we've really appreciated over the years is the way this community raises up the children that are members. And our second son, John, was born by emergency C-section, and so I'd been knocked out, and Miles had not wanted to see him until I was conscious. And so Mother Susan was actually the first one who saw him and visited him in the hospital and gave him a blessing. So we start early taking care of our kids. And then you just sort of see this beautiful continuity. Mother Carol was in my in-laws' wedding party when they were married, and she performed John's baptism when he was baptized. And so there was sort of for us this beautiful continuity. And then you just see the ways, the wonderful things we do with our kids to make them feel like they're really a part of the community and that they contribute to the services. Starting with a thing we no longer do. We used to have a tradition called the Living Advent Wreath, where we would wrap 4 young children in highly flammable tulle and then give them the torches to carry down the aisle. It's a wonder no one was killed and we didn't set the place on fire. But our son Calvin did that when he was maybe a kindergartner or a first grader, and he knew not to touch the flame, but no one had mentioned that the metal collar at the top gets really hot. And so he touched the collar, and you could just sort of see him startle, and then he yelled, "I got fired!" And handed the candle to Mother Susan and ran down the aisle. So we integrate them early, and then they have, they give kids an opportunity to participate as acolytes really at a pretty young age, and give them an opportunity to really feel like they were a meaningful part of the service. And Vicki Norick was our son John's first acolyte master, and did the training. And it's sort of a long day for what are maybe 8 and 9-year-olds when they start out. And so they had a long day of training and going through all the steps. And then at the end they had gathered, and she said, and all of you who know Vicki, it's sort of particularly funny that it was Vicki, but she said, we've covered a lot of material here today. I know it can be kind of confusing. There's a lot to remember. Do you have any questions? You can ask me anything. And so John raised his hand, and when called upon, his question was, can you tell me the difference between a frank and a wiener? She said, ask anything. And that was his question that was weighing on him, I guess, during the training. What's the difference between a frank and a wiener? So it is lovely though. They feel they can participate, and you see your child go from the smallest acolyte where there's barely a robe that fits them that isn't dragging on the ground, to ultimately carrying the lead cross high and strong, and it's just wonderful. And it's wonderful to see other people's children growing up too. I mean, we just love watching the little ones become bigger and bigger, and you see like Susanna the Masters now working for the diocese, and it's just, I think everybody here has such a feeling of family towards all of the children. It's just a lovely thing. So we were sort of service takers for a long time, and then as our kids got older, it became a little easier to become service givers. And so I joined the vestry, probably 15 years ago. This was in Dean Back's time. And so there was sort of a corner of us, and I think Robert Dennis was another one, and maybe Sharon Stewart, where we talk too much. And so Dean Batt gave us all jobs. And so I became secretary, and I think Robert became junior warden then, and it was sort of a way to get us to stop cracking jokes in the corner and pay attention and do some work. And so that was wonderful, and being on the vestry is really a tremendous opportunity to learn about the cathedral and what it takes to run a cathedral, and really to provide significant service in both the financial health of the cathedral and the physical health of the building and the people who are in it. You get to know those people very, very well, and you get to know far more about that the service doesn't just sort of happen, and it isn't just beautiful because that's how it has to be. It's beautiful and it works because lots and lots of people show up every day to volunteer in different ways. And so service on vestry is a wonderful way to get more of a sense of that. And then I also succeeded Robert Dennis as senior warden for a period of 6 or 7 years. And I guess Melba Reinhardt had been the first female senior warden, and I was the second. But that was really a wonderful opportunity for service as well. And you do sort of, you feel the weight of it a great deal, and there are many nights you lie awake thinking, how are we going to take care of this problem, or how is this going to possibly work out? And again, it's because people show up and they volunteer and they bring their gifts and they do great things. So again, it was an opportunity to sort of see even more how important everyone in the congregation is to the life of this place. So it's now been, I think 3 years maybe, since I was senior warden, and I do sleep better at night. And it is wonderful. So it's nice to have other people have an opportunity to bring them gifts. And I hope that you all will join that tradition, because it really is a great opportunity to participate meaningfully and to feel even more that you are a part of this family.
Good morning, I'm Robert Dennis. We're in Dean Willie Hall. Dean Willie married my mother and father, and I was baptized in the baptismal font 69 years ago that we all see as we go to services in our larger worship space. So I was guided to St. Paul's too, kicking and screaming by my parents because I didn't want to come here. And even when I got a little older, I didn't care much about coming here. However, something happened, a couple of things happened as Carolyn and I were married that brought us here to St. Paul's. And that was the Lord working in our lives, because this has become as an important a place in our lives as there is. And you all have become an extended members of our family and the most important people in our lives as well. Molly told the story about how Dean Back gave us assignments, and it was probably because we were talking too much, and so I was made junior warden with the stipulation that Carolyn will tell you I'm the least handy person in North America, okay? So I can't do junior warden stuff. I mean, junior wardens traditionally are the people at the church, or is the person at the church that knows about the grounds and the maintenance and how to take care of it, and especially in a 110-year-old campus. That's an important job and way above my pay grade. But God bless George. He said something about how I would be more of a spiritual kind of junior. Well, fine, I'll take that job. Well, but I said no ladders. I'm not gonna climb up on any ladder. 2 weeks into being a junior warden, it was obvious the junior warden had to climb up on this ladder to almost the second story. And as I get almost to the top, I realize my pants are slipping down. Am I going to moon downtown Oklahoma City, or am I going to take a hand off the ladder because I'm scared to death up there? And anyway, I wasn't much of a junior warden, and I wasn't much of a junior warden. But there is one thing that I've done that has meant the world to me here at St. Paul's. First of all, we've talked about our memories of Dean Willie Hall. My number one memory, when it has never been more beautiful ever, was for Larry and Susan's wedding, right here in Dean Willie Hall. And Carolyn and I, in fact, had the dinner party that brought Larry and Susan together for about an hour and a half, and then Susan never talked to us again, but somehow or another they got back together, and so their wedding was right here. It was a beautiful, beautiful wedding. Her husband, Larry Joplin, has been a friend of mine for a few days. About 20 years ago, said, "Oh, Robert, you have to join the altar guild. It's the best way to get in touch with your feminine side." And Robert White and I have done it, and it's just, it's essential for any real man to do this. Well, it was kind of a challenge. So I joined the altar guild. A week later, he left the altar guild. I guess he had gotten in touch with his feminine side and didn't really appreciate what that looked like. But I've been a member of the altar guild now for about 20 years. Carolyn, my wife, is an usher. When she first came to church here and said, "I'd like to be an usher," she was told that, "Why don't you go join the altar guild? Because ushering is men's work." Well, she's ushering, I'm altar guilding. I think, and I've served with the most beautiful men and women on the altar guild. I was told early on that we are the ones that help set the table for the Lord's Supper, for our guests and our members to be with us. And as we come to the table for Eucharist, it is the central point of our liturgy in many ways. I knew nothing about, and I'd gone to Episcopal church for a long time. I knew nothing about the difference between Rite 1 and Rite 2. I had no idea why some of the time the hangings were white, some of the time they were green, sometimes they were red. I had no idea about any of this. I had no idea about there were years within our broader church calendar and how readings were changed and marked and how they flowed and that there was in fact this beautiful flow to everything we do through our liturgy at St. Paul's. I learned all of that through working with altar guild. We have 4 altar guild teams, and those of you who are new or nearly new who might be interested, look in the bulletin. You'll see names of people that are each week are members of the altar guild. Go back to the sacristy. If you don't know where the sacristy is, just go. Exit right out the door nearest to our high altar, and you'll see the sacristy. Go in there and say, "I'm kind of curious about what you all do here." People will talk to you about it. As a matter of fact, we're always trying to recruit people. I just recruited 2 new members for our team last week. We now have 4 services every Sunday. We're it's the altar guild that is going to set those 4 services up. It's very special duty. And so I would urge you to think about joining the altar guild. Like I said, it's out of everything I've done, and I've done a few things, not any of them very well, and I'm not even very good at being an altar guild member, but I love it so much. So I can't say without, when I see the choir, any choir members in the room, thank you all. Both our 9 o'clock and our Right 1 and Right 2, our cathedral, what do you call them? There's the cathedral choir and the, oh, I can't say those kinds of things. Are great. And through the pandemic, when we had our 4 choir members that were covering these services, the music remained beautiful. And it remains formative, really. So I'm going to yield the rest of my time to John Coons, who is one of the dearest friends I have in this world and someone that's been a sidekick of mine for almost a lifetime now. John, come on up here.
I'm very nervous about following these 3 incredible people that have some wonderful stories. I'm just kind of the cathedral nerd, have been. Anyway, but just like Robert, my parents were married in 1945 here by Dean Willie, and then I was baptized in 1952 by Dean Willie. In fact, actually, I think my parents' wedding in 1945 was the first wedding that Dean Willie performed at St. Paul's. But I understand. It was just a small Saturday morning wedding. I mean, it was not a big deal at all, but probably one of the greatest marriages that there ever was. But anyway, so as a child, I can remember I really had a fascination from the church as long as I can remember. When I was probably 6 or 7 years old, at the 11 o'clock service, my parents would always sit back about the middle over on the epistle side, and I would go sit on the very front row, and I was just fascinated with everything that went on up there, and I would sit up there. Of course, my dad was embarrassed when, because I would do everything the choir did, so when they stood to sing the anthem, I stood in the front row. But anyway, I did. I had a love for it. And then in, probably 1962 or 3, we had the children's choir, St. Nicholas Choir, at the 9:15 service. Carolyn was in it with me. Robert, I don't think you were in the kids' choir. I don't
On the golf course.
Yes. I thought you were at that age, yes. So, but anyway, and then in 1965 was when I joined the Acolytes. I was an acolyte and just loved that. And going on, I was confirmed. And I don't know if you remember this, Robert, but in 1964 is when I was confirmed by Bishop Powell. But in those days, you were 12 years old when you went through confirmation. And Robert is a year older than me, and his wonderful sister Carol is a year younger than me. And so the Dennises apparently at that time decided so they could go together, they went in the group that I was in. Do you remember that? We were down there in the lounge. Father Boyinger was our teacher. And so anyway, it's like Robert says, we've been friends for a long, long time. And of course, when I was junior high and high school, I was kind of scared of Robert. I mean, he was so cool and all of this, and I was just, like I say, a nerd. But anyway, as time went on, then I became the acolyte master in 1972, and was that for 20 years, the only acolyte master. And then Vicki Norick came in 92, and then we've developed several acolyte masters since then and everything, which is much better, I'm sure. But anyway, and then I was a youth group sponsor, and wonderful people like Carolyn and her mother, her dear mother. Lennis Clifford was one of the greats of the church. I'll tell you, she was everything here at the church. She was the first woman on the vestry. She was the first woman delegate to convention. She ended up being on the executive council under presiding Bishop Browning. And in fact, I remember a great trip in like 1988 when Carolyn and I got to go with her for the executive council meeting in New York. And so while she met with the presiding bishop and all the people during the week, Carolyn and I were seeing the sights of New York City. That's the first time I'd been to New York City. And then we'd be with her in the evening. And one of the highlights was that the last night, they had a cocktail party up on the top of the 815 Second Avenue, which I didn't realize that's where the presiding bishop lives, in an apartment on the top of 815. And so they could bring, the executive council could bring people with them. And so, of course, Mrs. Clifford took Carolyn and me to that. And so it was just, you know, I was pretty high cotton having cocktails with the presiding bishop at 815 Second Avenue in New York City. But anyway, she was wonderful. And then I have to mention Robert Dennis's mother too, Ann Dennis, who was another one who was, we kind of, any of us that have been around, refer to her as a local saint right here. She was one of the most incredible women. My mother and her did a lot together. They're the ones that started Mobile Meals here.
Yes.
And my mother and I both worshiped your mother. She was a great lady. But anyway, so one of the things, and of course, I've taught Sunday school a lot, and then my good friends Rick and Janie Hill back here got me involved in summer camp at St. Crispin's at age 46. That was the first time I went to camp. And to the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade camp. And the story always goes that when I got there, it turned out Sanger Clark, that was his first time going to camp. He was just out of the 3rd grade. And so it turned out he was going to be in my cabin. So when Sherry got back to Oklahoma City, she called my mother and says, "Harriet, don't worry. Sanger's in John's cabin. He'll take good care of him." Which he did, too. He actually did. I remember that we have this thing called closing circle in the at St. Crispin's every night, where the whole cabin sits in a circle on the floor with a candle in the middle, and we go around and give thanks for whatever during the day, and it's just a sharing time. And so anyway, we were in this circle, and of course, you remember, I'm 46 years old, totally out of shape, as I am still. And anyway, we're sitting there, and they're going around, and Sanger's right next to me. Well, he finished his, and then it was my turn, and I was just sound asleep. And Sanger was very gently, John. It was really precious, but anyway. So, anyway, that's been a big focus of mine, that has been on the youth, because of the Sunday school, the acolytes, and the church camp, and New Beginnings, and all that stuff. And that's kind of where I felt my calling has been. I've done other things in the church too, but that's kind of it. But I have to mention one thing too, that in 1996, something happened that had me go into AA. I started my journey in Alcoholics Anonymous. And, it's the people here. I mean, there's the people in the AA, but so many of them are here too, and that really ministered to me, really made a difference to me. And Ann Dennis was one of the ones that was the most. She tried to carry a message to me long before I got into this. And so, because she was actually gone by the time I went into the program. But Robert and Rick and Janie, people like that, and Carolyn, all kinds of people. I mean, they're not all alcoholics, I don't but they've all been very, very helpful to me. Rick Hill used to say to me, he used to say, John, the kind of person you are, if you ever killed anybody under the influence of alcohol, besides the consequences, you would never be able to live with yourself. You couldn't do that. And it was actually a DUI that happened that got me into the program. And that night that I got that, it happened that I was coming back from a football game in Norman, and I so what had happened was somebody had called from their cell phone because I was weaving so bad on the highway. And anyway, so, and then this police officer, I can't give him enough credit. He was incredible to me. He never handcuffed me. He treated me with dignity, which, I mean, you know, it was amazing. But anyway, I just know that during that time, I was thinking to myself, Rick, I was thinking, you know, those words of Rick were coming back to me. And I thought to myself, you know, I know I'm in a lot of trouble tonight, but at least I didn't have a horrible accident or I didn't kill somebody. So, you know, God's like giving me a second chance. And so, you know, I had to go to jail that night for 4 hours, which was an awful experience. But anyway, one of the things, I was supposed to take my mother to the symphony that night. And so I was supposed to pick her up at like 6 o'clock to go to dinner in the symphony. And it was like 8:30 before I could call her. And so, of course, she was just aghast. You know, she was very grateful that I was in jail, that I was alive, you know. She thought the worst. But one of the things she said was, do you mind if I call George back? And I said, well, okay. And she said, the reason for that was because I was very close to the Back family. And so when I didn't come and pick Mother up, she thought maybe I had stopped over at the Back's house on the way back and was over there. So she called George and asked if I was there. Well, then, you know, she told him that I was supposed to pick her up. So he was aware that something was going on. He knew me well enough that he kind of figured probably what had happened. And so he kept calling Mother back to see if she'd heard. And that's why she wanted to call him and let him know. But anyway, I will have to say one funny thing about the police officer. When I was, you know, I said we got to be pretty good friends, and I had to take the breathalyzer test, you know, which I was doing everything I could think of to sober myself up. It didn't work. But anyway, when he came out with the results, I told him, I said, you know, I really need to move on because I'm supposed to take my elderly mother to the symphony tonight. He says, well, you're not going to be at the symphony. You're going to be about a block away. So if you know where the jail is, and you know where the civic center is, you know. So anyway, but anyway, I did make it to church the next morning, but then Sunday night, my doorbell rang, and there was George back, standing at my front door. He didn't say anything. He was just there. He knew I'd want to talk. So we came in, we had a wonderful visit, and I told him, I said, I'm sure this is a wake-up call. I need to do something. I need to get into AA. And he told me at the time, he says, you know, we have a lot of alcoholics at St. Paul's, and I'm not at liberty to tell you who they are. But he says, well, except for one, and that's Steve Parker. And he said he had told me if I ever needed any help with anybody, that he would, you know, would help. And he said, would you like me to have Steve call? I said, well, sure. And because I think he was one of the greatest people. And that's how he became my sponsor that night and started through. And then I'm going to close with a really important part of this story, because it shows, I mean, it's the people at this place. It's the people that are the important thing. The loving congregation who will do anything. And so, if you're not familiar with the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, the third step is to make a decision to turn your will and your life over to the care of God as you understand it. And so I had waited, because, you know, I had my license taken away for 6 months and all of that. And I was going to meetings at one of the clubhouses here, and several people kept saying, well, we're not going to see you after 6 months, because I was sentenced to go there for 6 months, plus a counselor for 6 months, once a week, and I had to have those papers signed and all that. I never missed a time. But anyway, some of these people in this one meeting says, we're not going to see you after 6 months, because we've seen people sent here by the courts, and, you know, once they do their time, they're out of here. Well, I knew in my my heart that I was gonna be there. And so, but I waited to do this third step until after that 6-month period. And so my sponsor, Steve, was getting ready to go up to Michigan. And he said, you know, I think it's time, it was in the summer. He said, I think it's time that you take your third step, and I think you need to do it in St. Paul's with George back. Because he knew the love I had for both of those. And so I kept trying to get with George, and we kept missing each other. And this was the time that we had just reopened, well, in April, we had reopened the cathedral in 97.
Easter.
Yeah, Easter of 97. And so this was in the summer then after that. And so anyway, I was working at our corporate headquarters down here on 101 North Robinson at the time. So I just took off at 4:30 one day, had my big book, and I drove up here. And it was another God thing, because I got here and George Back was walking out of this building and nobody else was here. And he saw me coming across the street with my big book. And he said, well, you want to do your third step, don't you? I said, yes. And so we opened the church, we went into the church, he didn't turn the lights on. We walked down the center aisle up to the altar, and we knelt down. And I have to say too, that part of this was at, nearly 5 o'clock in the evening, the lights weren't on. As I walked down the aisle, the Good Shepherd window, the one with Jesus holding the lost sheep in his arms, the light was shining brightly through that, right at me. And I mean, you may think I'm crazy, but I think that was a sign to me that something was about to happen. And so we went on up and knelt down at the altar. And I said, well, I have this prayer that I need to say. And George says, do you mind if I pray first? And I said, no. And so I'll never forget what he said as we knelt there. He says, as we kneel here in this sacred space that's so important in John's life, the place where his parents stood to be married, the place where he was baptized, the place where he was confirmed, the place where he's been touched by so many people, and the place where he's touched so many people. And we would ask you to restore his soul to its full beauty as we've restored this cathedral to its full beauty. And then I said the third step prayer in AA, and we just knelt there. And I will tell you this, I've never in my life felt as loved, as safe, as secure as I did in that moment. I felt Aunt Dennis's presence there. I felt my father's presence there. I felt my grandparents' presence. I felt the angel, the archangels, and all the company of heaven were right there. It's the way I felt at that moment. And I don't know exactly when. Well, I don't know if it was right at that moment, but sometime after that moment, the desire to drink has left me. I have no desire to do it at all. And furthermore, I am happy that my friends can enjoy alcohol, and that's wonderful. I just don't want it. It just doesn't even appeal to me. That's why I can be the best bartender for Allied Arts recording meetings. That didn't bother me. But anyway, but all of that to say, and and we have AA meetings here, or we're starting to, right? We have had,
We've had that.
and so, that's a big part of it. It's just, it's the people that have come through these doors that make it all happen. Thank you.
Hey, John. I know we're going to wrap this, since it's about to be over. How would you feel about having John lead us in the third step prayer, just real briefly? Would you be comfortable with that?
Except I don't have it with me, and I can't remember.
My creator, I'm now willing, you should have all of me, good and bad.
Why don't you come up here and do it?
No, John, I don't want to, since you told that great story, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable.
Just say so. Okay.
All right, so we're gonna we're gonna say, I don't know how this is gonna go. I just wanna say that these four people, I mean, you're hearing continuing threads as you're listening to their stories, how one thread of life touches another person's thread of life and another. And I remember Jeff Irwin coming to my office in 1994 because his friends Ann and Joe McFerrin brought him, and then Joe McFerrin was in church today for the first time in years. I mean, your threads of connection just keep overlapping. And that is what, this happens in this place. And I look forward to all of you, your own threads of connection, interweaving into all of ours. And then we do become like one family. I agree with Robert, we all are one family. So why don't we lead the Lord's Prayer together in closing? I know that one too. So, Episcopal tradition is that we either kneel or stand and pray, so let us